6 journalists have been killed in Mexico so far this year. Mexican authorities say the body of TV host and model Michelle Perez Taddeo was found on Tuesday, just south of Mexico City. Police have not said how she was killed. Media protection groups and activists are voicing their concerns after 4 journalists were killed in January and another was found murdered earlier this month. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 3 were killed in Mexico in 2021 and 4 were murdered in 2020. CBS News correspondent Enrique Acevedo has been following these murders. He joins us now for more. Enrique, tell us more about what's fueling this violence against journalists in Mexico. Is there reason to believe that they're being targeted because of their profession?
Absolutely. I think the violence against journalists in Mexico is part of a larger context of violence in that country. There have been over 100,000 homicides in Mexico in the last 3 years. The nationwide murder rate has remained unchanged at 29 murders per 100,000 inhabitants since 2018. Let me give you an example. By comparison, the U.S. homicide rate in 2019 was 5.8 per 100,000 people. Add a broken legal system, systemic corruption, and unlimited firepower supplied by U.S. gun manufacturers, and that gives you an idea of what's behind the killing of journalists in Mexico. As to who's behind it, well, historically, most of the journalists are targeted for exposing government officials or gang members. But I was recently in Tijuana reporting on the recent killing of 2 journalists in that city, and I asked a local photographer these exact same questions. And he told me that killing a journalist in Tijuana is cheap, meaning that there are no real consequences because over 90% of the crimes remain unpunished.
Given that, Enrique, do authorities know really who is behind this? Have there been any arrests in these murders?
There have been some arrests, and authorities in Mexico say that shows their commitment to bringing justice to the victims and their families. But the truth is that many of those arrests never lead to a conviction, and in most cases, we're talking about the material authors of the crimes and not necessarily the people behind them. That question of who's behind this latest surge in killings in Mexico, in the murders of journalists, remains unanswered because, like I said, historically there was a more logical explanation, maybe a corrupt government official, someone who is part of the organized crime, related to or linked to narco organizations. But lately that seems to be changing, and it can be pretty much anyone.
I also want to ask you, Enrique, about how the Mexican government is responding, because U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tweeted on Wednesday calling for greater protections for journalists. But Mexico's president responded saying he thinks that Blinken is, quote, not well informed about the situation. So tell us, Enrique, what do you make of this response from President López Obrador?
That's a great question. When confronted with facts, President López Obrador likes to say that he has his own facts. Let's just call them alternative facts. Right. And that seems to be the case here. The truth is that since 2000, at least 145 journalists have been killed in Mexico, 28 of them during López Obrador's term. And I would argue that in this case, it seems that President López Obrador is the one who's not well informed.
I wonder just, is there pressure from the international community, given the political undertones of these killings? Are journalism organizations working effectively to put pressure on Mexico to do more to protect journalists?
Article 19 and the Committee to Protect Journalists have repeatedly called upon authorities in Mexico to act and to try to stop the killing of journalists. There was an office of a prosecutor dealing with crimes against freedom of expression in Mexico created in 2012. So that they've opened over 800 investigations, but only solved less than 1% of the cases that they've opened. Some European countries have expressed concern about the overall security situation and the human rights violations in Mexico as well. I think people are starting to realize that the killing of journalists in Mexico is not a local problem, but really a threat against freedom of the press, against freedom of expression everywhere.
Okay. Enrique, thank you.
Thank you.